Welcome back to a channel that I have not been on for a while, but we are going to seamlessly ignore that and move on to the beginning of the video. Welcome! It is Preptober because we are at October 15th, halfway through the month. Probably should have started earlier, but when do I ever do anything the way it should be done? But that's okay, because we are here, we are starting, and we are getting ready for 2022 NanoWriMo, which is coming up way faster than I feel like it should. I have no idea where this year went, and that's okay, because life moves on like that, and every day is a day closer to tax season, and that sucks. I am here with a video that I think I made last year in some degree of similarity, but I have some different things that are going to go on. So we will be talking about how to prepare for NaNoWriMo if you are like bare bones, haven't quite figured out what you're writing, or you have an idea, but we're just sort of trying to figure out how to get ready to write a book, or 50,000 words at least, in a month. So I think what I said last year was probably similar in the beginning. I presume that if you're here, you probably at least have an idea. Maybe. I could be wrong. And if you're just like, hey, I want to write a book, I have no idea what to write, that is very bold. Good for you. That stresses me out. But also I have like a folder of, I think, a million topics that I'll probably never touch because that's too many things, and that's okay. But we'll just briefly touch on that if you are one of those people who has no real idea what they want to write. Think about things like, what's your favorite genre to read? What keeps you engaged? What are your favorite other types of media? So books, not only that, but just movies, TV shows, anything of you like, like manga, any of that. What kind of things interest you? And then think about thematically what would fit into those sorts of things. So if you want to write a fantasy book, that's going to take a lot more preparation for Nano than if you want to write like an in-world, mystery, like an Agatha Christie style thing. So you kind of have to take into consideration the time crunch that you're going to be under if you want to start writing a fantasy book right now for Nano. But anything is possible. It's just going to be difficult. So I wouldn't recommend it, but I'm not trying to dissuade you from doing it in general. That seem fair? Okay. I guess also if you are one of those people who has no idea what they're trying to write at all, just like kind of make a list. I know that sounds really basic, but just write down the kind of things that we were saying before that interest you, and then maybe look at prompts. So you can go on to, there's tons of Instagram accounts and everywhere else that have writing prompts, and there a lot of them can be like either scene based or character based. So it's like, your main character falls into this specific situation. What do they do? And it'll be difficult with those because you have to sort of figure out a character. But if you read through them, that might give you just sort of a basic idea of some kind of a concept, right, that you could start with. That's the best I can give right now on that because we've got a lot more to cover. But if you do have questions about that, I have more things to say. We just got to move on, otherwise we'll be here for forever. So, number one in the I have an idea, but I just don't know how to start writing a book, which is reasonable, is brainstorming, which again seems obvious, but how do you brainstorm for something that is so monumental? I know everybody comes at this differently, so for me, I usually have at least like an idea and maybe some kind of character dynamics that I have in mind before I start actually getting into the meat of things. But there's not a ton of depth there. It's more just like certain scenes that I can picture in my head, and then everything else around it is sort of a blank void. So what I recommend you do is take your ideas, whatever they may be, and just write every single bullet point down, and then you can kind of process from there. So fill as much of that information, even if it doesn't make any sense, even if it's just sort of a jumble of things that probably wouldn't work well together, does not matter. Because things, especially when you get to the middle, which will be another video because I'm not gonna fit all that into here, but when you get to the middle where everything gets really difficult and people generally say is the hardest part of the book to write, that stuff will be invaluable. So now you have your list of all of your ideas, and that's great. But what are you going to do with them? So obviously you don't really want to jump in right away and get started because we don't really have enough information yet. What information is necessary? Well, who are your characters? And I know this, again, everything in here seems really obvious. You would think it all makes sense, but it's getting into the minutia of all of that that really helps, you know, when you're in the writing process later on. Abby Emmons is an amazing writing YouTuber. And I really like the way that she put it, because I think it's the way I've thought about things for a while, but I couldn't like verbalize it. And it's that characters are the ones driving the story. So everything is character driven. Even if it's plot driven, it's still character driven, because the characters are the ones making things happen. And at least the way I see it is, if the characters aren't the ones making things happen and everything is happening to them, then they're not very engaging characters. So the way that I've started to try to like develop my plot line for this one, because for my current Nano project, I've been trying a new method of outlining to see if it makes things any easier, is consider everything as the reaction of your main character. Editing me here. Sorry if the audio sounds different. I'm on my phone. I just realized that I probably didn't explain this as well as I could have, so I'm going to do that while you watch this lovely video. Say you have a character named Pine Nut for some reason, I don't know, and Pine Nut does something in the environment that they are in. So for example, we can go like Aladdin style, you know? Pine Nut steals something in the marketplace. And that would then obviously have some sort of repercussions, right? So in Aladdin, I guess we can take that example, when Jasmine does it, she almost loses her hand, and then Aladdin has to come help her, and then we get that whole, you know, musical montage. In a different kind of story, you would see something similar, but let's say what Pine Nut steals is like a magic scrunchie. I don't know where any of these ideas are coming from. And they put the scrunchie, Pine Nut puts the scrunchie on their wrist, and all of a sudden, the scrunchie splits in two, and now it's handcuffs. I don't know. And so now they're like, oh no, I'm gonna have to figure out what to do to get my hands out of these handcuffs. Nothing's working, right? They kind of go panicking, trying to cut through the scrunchy handcuffs, and nothing's working, right? You know, they're so desperate to get something to work out to break these handcuffs that they end up like breaking into somebody's house because they see something very sharp in there, and they're like, oh, this could work. And now they have the repercussions of breaking into somebody's home. So even if they get out the scrunchy handcuffs, maybe they get caught. And then what happens after that? I don't know, maybe they befriend the person who owns the home. Maybe now it's an enemies to lovers. I don't know. My point is that every action, I guess in physics, as they say, has an equal and opposite reaction. So everything should be viewed as the interactions that the characters' decisions have on their surroundings and everyone else involved, how all of those sort of work together and push the story forward. Which means that you've got to really know who that character is before you start writing. And not just them, but the people around them. So the side characters, everybody who's like in their periphery, you don't have to know everything about them, but you know, like what drives them, right? So, you know, you've got that really cliche, like, what's my motivation? What is your character's motivation? Why are they doing anything that they're doing? How would they react to a certain thing? Because the way that I would react, you know, to say, you know, like a boulder, that's something that everybody would probably run away from. But in other more nuanced situations, like, you know, you're in a very tense room with family members, or somebody says something and it's uncomfortable, does your character respond to that? Do they like call them out? Are they confident, or are they sort of the person who pushes themselves into the background? What kind of reactions do they have? How do they fit into the world around them? All of those things are important answers that you're going to have to find along the way. Otherwise, you know, when you're writing, they might get lost in the story or end up doing things that don't make sense for them as you kind of go along. So say, you know, you have a character that you're going to write, and we'll call them, I don't know, Tree. It's a weird name, but who cares? So we'll call your character Tree. If this person, Tree, is in a very awkward situation, so we'll say there's a cocktail party, they're at a partner's event, somebody says something very uncomfy, very offensive. If this person all of a sudden starts yelling, if Tree is just like, hey, that's not okay, what are you doing? And then causes a scene, but the whole rest of the book, they're just sort of like demure about things. The Tree is not the kind of person who speaks up for anything, and they kind of would rather just be on their own and quiet, and they don't like the spotlight, then unless there's a specific reason for that, which could be, I don't know, I should probably come up with a more specific example, I guess. So we'll make this even more detailed. So Tree is at an event with their partner. It is a law firm. They're having a network holiday event with all of their partners and, law partners, not just romantic partners, whatever. And one of the higher ups in the company makes a very misogynistic joke about somebody. And in the past, you wrote down, or at least as the writer, that Tree has very bad experiences with people being, very misogynistic. If this is the one thing that sparks their anger, then that makes sense to have in the story. But if none of that happens, if it's just sort of another like haha awkward situation for them, then why would Tree ever say anything? But if that's a necessary plot point for your story, then it's just not going to be very strong. So I know that was very long-winded, but my point is you have to know who your character is to know how they respond to things so that the story doesn't get jumbled and your characters don't do things that make no sense. If that makes sense. Another tip that I did get from Abby Emmons, which I think is a really good one, is when you're developing your characters, if you're having a hard time figuring out how they would respond to things, is to figure out the character personality test. So I know there's a couple different ones, and I will list them here because I don't really remember them. I have used them, but I'm really bad with remembering those sorts of things. But that way when you fill it out for your character, it'll kind of give you their general responses to things, and that's just sort of a jumping point. You don't have to be so strict about that. But it's somewhere if you're having a really hard time figuring out how a new person that you're trying to make out of nowhere would respond to something, it's at least somewhere to start. Also, if you're writing a multi-POV book, you've got to do this for both of your perspective characters, so come up with some idea of what happened in their background, their backstory, that drives them to some degree. And I'm not saying that everything that we do is because of things that happened in our past. I feel like nature versus nurture is an ongoing debate. And in my opinion, it's a bit of both. So, it's not everything, but I do think that a lot of what we do is driven by kind of lessons. It's like you touch a stove and it's hot. You don't want to touch it again, right? So those sorts of details and things that we have in our past do help us make decisions in the future. So we have to know the characters and what sort of experiences they've had and what kind of person they are in order to write them into the story. There's lots of other things, and as you go, depending on what kind of story you're writing, it might differ. And also the characters who aren't the main characters, you want them to have some depth as well. So just have a couple of facts similar to your main character about what drives them, what kind of person they are, how they react to situations, and that would be a good place to start. I also like to have a little sheet, doesn't have to be overly complicated, about the main characters and how they generally interact with each other. So you kind of have a sense of their dynamics before you go in. How do they know each other? What is their general, feeling about the other person? Is it positive, negative? Is there animosity? Is there tension? Have they got any kind of, intensive history between them? Are they just meeting? And what are their, first thoughts when they see that person? So, those sorts of things. And then kind of right at the very end or somewhere in there what their relationship should look like by the end of the book. So if this will help you develop your character arcs as you're getting ready to write the story. So you kind of got their general initial character interactions and any background that's necessary, and then by the end, what that should look like. And then as you're going and trying to write the plotting of the middle of the book, which I said before we'll get into in another video, but as you're trying to get that going, you can sort of start to plot out the ways that could happen. So the ways to develop that character arc based on their interactions with each other, with the world around them, with other people. It'll all come together. Promise. So you're also going to have to consider when you're writing your story what your genre is. So like I said, if you're writing a fantasy book for Nano, I have tried that and I've done it. It's a lot. It's a lot. But you can. It's just going to be you need to really get your world building going. Otherwise, you get kind of lost. Because it's the same sort of situation that we were just talking about with characters and character interactions. You'll have to have some world building and a world profile and where they fit into the world. Is there a magic system? How does it differ from our world? Are there different rules? There's a lot you got to figure out. So if you're going to do that, that's a whole other game. And if we want to do a separate video about world building, we can. But that's sort of what I have to say about that. And you also want to take into consideration any themes that you're going to try to run through your book. So obviously there's like the more general theme, you know, like what message you get across, which sometimes people don't know right away when you start writing what that is. But I think as you develop your ideas, you see what kind of thing that might be, like something about friendship or love or trust, like, you know, those sorts of overarching ideas. But there's also like the smaller themes. So in the story that I'm working on for Nano right now, one of my themes is this concept of an apple tree. Um, it kind of sounds weird, but it's whatever. So there are two characters whose interactions are very interwoven with an apple tree, but it's not anything over like humongous, right? It's just sort of subtle in the background, and when major story events happen, it all kind of ties into this apple tree idea. It's kind of hard to explain without explaining the whole plot, but I don't have time for that right now. So that's just sort of what I mean, like those little things that you kind of want to carry through your story. These are, I know it's a lot, and especially if you're just starting, but I'm just trying to give you like a basic list of things to consider when you're starting, just to have in mind as you begin outlining and doing all that, which will come later too, because right now we're still just trying to find our ideas and develop stuff, right? I also have a lot more to say about most of these topics. I'm just sort of trying to give a very broad introduction to how to prepare for NanoWriMo. So if you have any interest in like a more thorough breakdown, you know, character types or any of that sort of stuff that you want to hear about, just let me know if there's like a specific thing, because I know this is a lot of information. I just don't want to make you watch, you know, like 6 hours of me trying to get through all of these ideas. So I'm trying to just keep it going. But if there's something that you're like, hey, I would love to hear more about that, just let me know. That's what I'm here for. So now let's say you have your character profiles, you have your general world building ideas if you need that. You know some of the themes that are going to be carried through the book. You know generally what's going on. Now you have to figure out your plot. Well, this is the hard part. And it does depend on what kind of writer you are. So you generally, what people say, you've got your planner, your pantser, and your plancer. So if you don't know what those mean, the planner is the person who sits down and does more in-depth outline, maybe does some scene cards, so everything is very well planned out. The pantser is somebody who has maybe just got the very basic ideas and then just writes by the seat of their pants and sees where the story goes completely unoutlined. And then you have people like me who are plancers, which is just somewhere in the middle. So I definitely do need more structure than a pantser all the way, like altogether. But I find that I can't fully outline, like I'm not good with scene cards. When I'm writing in depth, like I'm not going to get too in depth here, but when I'm writing chapters in depth and trying to get through especially the middle parts, what I do is right at the beginning of the chapter what I'm hoping this chapter is supposed to show, if that helps, like how it impacts the story, to make sure that everything has a relevance. So either what it teaches the character, how it changes the world around them, if there's a specific character interaction, like what that means to the people involved and how it pushes the story forward, because you always want to make sure that what you're writing or planning is getting you from one place to the next and not staying stagnant. So that's, if you're outlining, something you have to keep in mind is, what is the point of this point? You know, bullet points or however you want to outline. And there's plenty of like story structures and stuff, but I'm going to get into that in a different video too. So like I said, this is very bare bones. We're just trying to cover like the big points, and then we'll maybe do smaller videos about whatever people want, or whatever I choose to do, because who's to say. But I'm going to get way more into like how to outline when I do the middle, because I'm thinking that that's probably going to be where that fits in the best, and this video is probably already very long. So what I have in mind is, you know, we can talk more, hopefully next week is what I'm thinking, about the middle and how to more specifically outline your book. This has hopefully been able to like help you generate some ideas about how to get started prepping for NanoWriMo, and next time we will be way more in the midst of it all in terms of outlining, getting things ready, all of that fun stuff as we get ready for November. But I hope that there was something in here that was, you know, tangibly useful. Not tangibly, that means you can touch it. Well, if you're like pen to paper, is that tangible? Yeah, you know, whatever. It's all good. If it's, you know, I just hope it was something that was kind of useful in there. I'm going to, when I edit it, hopefully make this seem more coherent. I make no promises, but like I said, we've got a lot of other things to cover. If there's anything specific, just leave it down in the comments. Was there anything that, you know, didn't make sense? Also let me know in the comments, because even me talking, I'm like, I don't know if I ever make any sense. If you did like this video, please hit the little like guy, that would be really nice, and then subscribe if you're interested, because we're going to be doing a bunch more writing videos throughout October and November as we get into Nano. And then I've got some other like more commentary style stuff if that's something you're into. I've got one that I'm going to record right after this. So there's a whole lot coming up, and I'm going to try to be more consistent about things. I know I've said that before, but I really mean it this time. I really mean it. So thank you for sticking through my return / jumble of thoughts, and I promise that I will be more coherent in coming days. So thanks again for sticking around. If you liked it, please like, hit subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff. Comment if there's anything specific that you're looking for. And, you know, if there's nothing else, then for now, sweet dreams.